do what I do because of my dad. He gave his life for the pursuit of knowledge. Because up there is where our story's going to be told.
Please state your mission objective.
I am attempting to stop an uncontrolled antimatter reaction, which threatens our entire solar system.
We're approaching Mars.
Spacecom believes my father's responsible.
We're doing big things up here, real big.
What did he find out there in the abyss?
The enemy up here is not a person or a thing. It's the endless void. The world awaits our discovery.
Hi guys, welcome back to Dingo Reviews. Today we're going to be going with an in-depth spoiler review and discussion about Ad Astra. Again, my name's Chad.
And my name is Jeremy. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube. It helps out a lot.
All right, Jerry, so let's get really far into this. Let's go as much as we can. Ad Astra, what do we got going on here? This is a film that was directed by James Gray, obviously, written by James Gray and Ethan Gross. It is 20th Century Fox film. Obviously stars Brad Pitt as Roy McBride. He's our main astronaut in the movie. Tommy Lee Jones plays his father, H. Clifford McBride. We also have Ruth Negga, who plays Helen Lantos. Also, we have Liv Taylor, who plays Roy's ex-girlfriend or wife. They don't really explain too well in the film. But another interesting fact, Liv Taylor also played an love interest of another astronaut in a similar role back in Armageddon in 1998.
Yeah, and there's a lot of interesting crossovers between this film and lots of other space films. For example, the director of photography is Hoyt van Hoytema. He was also worked as the director of photography on Interstellar.
And then last but not least, it looks like we have Donald Sutherland. He plays Thomas Pruitt. And same thing goes here. Donald Sutherland and Tommy Lee Jones were both in a space movie previously. That was Space Cowboys back in 2000.
All right, yeah, so let's go ahead and get into the meat of this. This film, it's pretty self-explanatory. Basically, Brad Pitt's character, Roy, is an astronaut. He's a prodigy. He is tasked with going on a top-secret mission to go and find his father, who caused somewhat of a catastrophe with some experiment in deep space.
Yeah, so like you said, Jared, at this point, I'm sure if listeners are listening, viewers are watching this, they've already seen the film, so we don't really need to delve too much into the synopsis, but pretty much Brad Pitt, it follows his journey from Earth to deep space to investigate his father, see what's going on. A lot of great things happen along the way, right? I think the first thing at the very beginning of the film, we get set off right now. I mean, this is near future. They've got a huge space antenna that I think goes all the way up to the International Space Station. Brad Pitt's character, Roy McBride, he's working on that space station. It looks like he goes out to do some repairs. This is when the first electrical surge hits, damages space station, and then we've got this basically free fall. I don't know what that would be, 60,000 feet from space to Earth, and that kind of sets off the whole film right there.
Yeah, it's really an incredible scene, and it sets a great precedent for what all the following scenes are, because the scenes actually get better and better. It's amazing that they're able to top that excitement. But yeah, the next scene that was really stood out was obviously they have to go to the moon to send a broadcast message to Roy's father from a top secret facility. And that is a great scene where there's this amazing space car chase.
Yeah, it's almost, I mean, the way they've set up this film, in the near future, we've got, space exploration. We now have trips that you can plan to the moon, right? You've got all of these people who plan their trips to the moon. So Brad Pitt takes commercial flight to the moon. Basically, he goes up there. We see once we got on the moon, there's obviously a lot of capitalization that's gone around. We see a lot of well-known brands. I think there's a Subway in like the airport or the space station there, so we see that. As he's going, he's got to travel from that space station to the dark side of the moon. Basically, that's where the secret base is, and that's where he takes off from there to go to Mars. But there's also pirates, space pirates, if you will, right? And those are the people who are chasing him as he's traversing to the dark side of the moon. We've got that great space battle. I think a lot of the, great cinematography, great special effects during that whole scene. Even the sound, kind of drew you in the whole way.
Yeah, and I mean, I really liked the realistic portrayal of these space pirates. It wasn't like some Star Wars-y type of thing. They were using, semi-realistic guns, and everything was in that sort of 1/6 gravity time space of what it would be like to fight on the moon.
Yeah, and I thought that scene specifically, again, like we've talked about before, we talked about on our spoiler-free review, how this is a slow burn film. So there's very small action pieces, suspenseful pieces, but when they are done, they're done extremely well.
Yeah, and that even goes for a lot of the scenes that are not action-based. There's a lot of still moments. There's one scene where Roy, played by Brad Pitt, is walking through like a red lit hallway, and he speaks to Ruth Negga's character, who is Helen Lantos, and she was born on Mars, which is a kind of an interesting world building there. But basically, there's this beautifully lit scene that's very reminiscent of like Blade Runner or 2001.
Yeah, Jer. So like you said, the still moments are the basis of this film, really. Like I said, we've got a few action pieces, suspenseful pieces scattered throughout, but the base of this movie is really a character study, and I think those kind of still moments, almost kind of slow motion, that goes back to the whole slow burn of the film. Those are what kind of encapsulate us as the audience.
Yeah, and I think that this film has a lot of correlation to other space films in that way. I mean, when you're moving in space, you're moving in a different gravity. It's just realistic that you're only going to move so fast, just physically as well as with the plot. And I think that we really see that throughout the film. One of the interesting things is that the director, one of his main goals, he stated, was to try and make one of the most realistic depictions of space travel ever put onto film. Do you think he did that successfully?
Yeah, Jer. So like you were saying, the still moments, they kind of are overall for the film, right? It is a slow burn film. These still moments, kind of slow motion, almost that kind of wide view, beautiful angles, beautiful cinematography. They kind of give the audience, just immerse you a whole lot more, right?
Yeah, and I think that's really well contrasted with the fact that throughout the whole movie, Brad Pitt's character is this ace pilot astronaut whose pulse never goes above 80 something, and everybody's talking about how cool-headed he is and how unusually calm he is, and inside there's actually a lot of deep turmoil. I think that is really personified both in Brad Pitt's acting and also in the set and the environment.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do. Obviously, I've never been to space, so I couldn't tell you if it is indeed a realistic, depiction of it or not. But I think based on other films that we've seen in the similar genre, obviously there's Gravity, there's Interstellar, 2001: A Space Odyssey. But I think kind of the isolation that we get throughout the film of Brad Pitt's character being alone in that vastness of space, there's only maybe the first half of the film he's actually surrounded by people, and then after that it's basically him traveling off to deep space by himself, and we've got that emotional kind of mental aloneness.
Yeah, and I think this is a good point to talk about the ending. Okay, the whole film was stunning and it looked great. And there were all these beautiful moments punctuated by moments of accelerated violence and then the silence again.
Yeah.
Overall, do you think that when we reach the end, which maybe you can touch on what the end is, do you think that the payoff was strong enough to make this film a strong film?
Absolutely. I think he's got a lot of nonverbal cues throughout the film that we kind of kept up on. There's a few scenes where one specifically kind of zooms in on his face and he's got like an eye twitch going on as I think he's recording into his like mental check simulation thing that he's got to do every so often. And you can see a lot of emotion just in his facial features. And it speaks to kind of, I think, an over encompassing thing of this film: mental health, emotional health. Those are strong motivations behind this film. And I think just the vastness and aloneness of space can kind of correlate to how someone with mental health or emotional issues can kind of feel detached and alone as well.
Yeah, I will say that there are some very strong points at the end. For example, I felt that the interaction between Brad Pitt's character and Tommy Lee Jones' character felt pretty authentic, pretty realistic. There was that really great line where he says, "I still love you, Dad." There was also a really great line where previously, I forgot about this one, when Brad Pitt was on the moon and they're fighting the space pirates, he says something to the sort of like, "We're still fighting over rocks" or something. "We have all this technology and we're still fighting over rocks." So I felt that the film had a lot of really strong themes and really powerful conflicts that made the movie worth seeing.
Yeah.
With that being said, there was perhaps maybe some missed opportunity. Maybe I want the old-fashioned happy ending. But, at the end of the day, basically the gist of the movie was Tommy Lee Jones' character was obsessed with finding extraterrestrial life.
Yeah.
And he tells Roy, played by Brad Pitt, "I never found it. We searched all of known space and found nothing. There's nothing but us." And Brad Pitt comes back and says, "Well, that's great. Now we know what there is in the universe and we know that there's just us and we have to take care of ourselves." Although I thought that was a quaint and nice, kind of way to end this melancholy journey. For me, it just missed that maybe there was a little more kick I was hoping for in that moment. Although, again, if the director was going for realism, that seemed like a very realistic scene.
Well, and Jerry, I think this is, on our previous conversation, this is where we've kind of disagreed. I personally felt that the ending of the film, we see Brad Pitt's character. He finally reaches this Lima project that's out in deep space in Neptune. Finally reaches his father. His father is basically killed off the whole crew. He's kind of, I don't necessarily, if you say he's gone insane or anything like that, but he's not all mentally there. And I personally felt the interaction between Brad Pitt and Tommy Lee Jones and, coming to see your father after 30 years. And there's a strong kind of emotional conversation between them. Brad Pitt's going to set up this bomb to destroy the Lima project and to destroy the space station so that these electrical charges stop happening. There's sort of a confrontation between them. Tommy Lee Jones basically tells his son, "You got to let me go. I've completed my mission and you got to let me know. Now you got to go complete yours." And I think from my perspective, I really enjoyed how they did that. Tommy Lee Jones floats off into space. Brad Pitt starts the launch of the nuke that explodes. We've completed his mission. He goes back to Earth. He goes back to his wife or his ex-girlfriend, Liv Taylor's character. And I think it's a circle for him. It completes his journey. Yeah,
I mean, we're talking about literally there's physical distance of billions of miles between the father and son, whereas in many other movies that may have taken place in, you know, the old world when they're exploring America and maybe the father went off on a ship sailing. It's a typical sort of like Navy sailing, going away from your family story, but done in a new way and done really well. I'll give it that. I had fun with the film and I enjoyed it. With that, I do want to quickly mention what the critics are saying. And currently the Metascore from Metacritic is at 80 and the Rotten Tomatoes score is at 82% for the tomato meter and 45% on the audience score. I think that's pretty indicative of the type of people who are going to enjoy this film, is that probably about 50% of a normal audience is going to dislike this film because of how slow it is. And also it's a little bit artsy fartsy and pretentious at times, but I like that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, and I think that overall for me, that's really what it is. I mean, this is essentially a father and son movie, right? It's about the conflict. It's about their relationship. You know, I feel like the backdrop of space was put in to basically kind of encapsulate that aloneness and that vulnerability and, you know, being emotionally detached and having this vastness of space. And sometimes, you know, if you've got those emotional or mental struggles, you can feel that way sometimes, right? Like I'm alone in this huge just universe, right? So I think overall that's the main theme of the film. And it could have been a film about a father and son relationship done just on Earth. Oh, okay, we've got a drama and we've got a father and son conflict, blah, blah, blah. I think adding the additional elements of the space and then adding in those additional set pieces and those, you know, suspense sequences, that just adds to the film overall.
Yeah, I would agree in a way. On one point there, I am very happy with the fact that the film took a more sophisticated route to marketing it and that they didn't show us every little thing the movie is about, which I really loved, because going into this movie, I literally knew almost nothing about it. I knew that it was a space film with Brad Pitt and Tommy Lee Jones. I knew that he had to go out into space to save something or someone, but I didn't even know that the whole world was in jeopardy. And I stayed away from most of the longer previews for that reason. But I agree that they did set expectations of the audience to have what I would say sort of a louder ending or something more spectacular. And instead it had a very quiet yet also meaningful ending. I enjoyed it, though. It was refreshing, even though I could see how it could be a letdown to a lot.
Well, and I will say this, Jer, I think on the audience score specifically for Rotten Tomatoes, you know, and I think I've talked to you and I have talked about this, and I believe we mentioned it briefly on our previous podcast when we did the spoiler-free review of Ad Astra. I feel very strongly that the marketing for this film was not done correctly. I felt when I watched a lot of the trailers and what I had been reading prior to the movie being released, I was expecting an Interstellar. I was expecting a huge twist at the end where, oh my God, you know, something crazy is going to happen. And I'll be honest with you, for about 3/4 of the movie, I was kind of expecting a different payoff at the end than we got. I was really happy with what we got, but I was expecting it to go somewhere else. Right. And I think the marketing was kind of a disservice in that aspect.
Yeah, I think we're in complete agreement. It's definitely an outstanding performance all across the board. All the actors and cast were amazing. The director of photography was the same director of photography from Interstellar. Amazing cinematography. And also, I was really, really impressed with how restrained and subdued Gray was, the director on this film. With that, let's go ahead and get into our main likes, dislikes. Was it worth seeing? I think we kind of already went over it, but let's just give it the official Dingo score.
Yeah, I think if you've gone into this movie expecting an Interstellar level twist, or kind of that Gravity had that great like edge on your seat, like you felt you were in that spaceship with George Clooney and Sandra Bullock, if you go in expecting that, you're not going to get it, right? You're going to get a character driven, especially by Brad Pitt's performance. And we've talked about this before, but he gives an amazing performance. I think this is Oscar worthy. And I also, throw it out there, but Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with him as supporting actor, I think he's had 2 great performances this year. Some of the best of his career, I will say that. I think, we can go back and really talk about that, about his depiction of this character, Roy McBride. And, we've stated it's kind of a subdued performance. There's a lot of nonverbal cues. We talked a little bit about, his facial reactions and how he, the visuals that he gives when he's going through these set pieces and that sort of thing. But I think ultimately, for me, one of the best things I really enjoyed was his performance.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, this is also one of the best films of the year, but just taking the film into consideration on its own, I do feel that it was almost perfect. It did miss the mark just slightly in that I feel there were little points that could have maybe been done a little bit better. With that, I'm going to give it a score of 9 out of 10 dingoes.
Yeah, Jer. So official Dingo score for me, like I said, I believe this is a 10 out of 10, one of the best films of the year for me. All right, Jer. Yeah. So with my 10 and your 9, I think we can aggregate the score for both of us at a 9.5. So that'll be our official Dingo score is 9.5. But yeah, I think, we've definitely stated this. This is definitely a film worth seeing. Jerry, I know you saw this on IMAX. I saw this on Dolby Cinema. I believe IMAX would be the best way to go, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you. If you really want the full experience, I would say IMAX was well worth it. I mean, it was exceptional. It was an experience in IMAX. All right, yeah, so I think that pretty much wraps it up. The last thing we might want to touch on is the box office numbers. For United States and Canada, it looks like it grossed $19.2 million opening weekend. Not a bad turnout.
All right, guys, so we'll leave you with that here. Just a couple reminders here. As always, make sure you follow us on all of our social media. We've got Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter out there. Feel free to definitely comment below. This is our spoiler in-depth review. Give us your thoughts and opinions. If you've already seen it, if you're going to go see it, if this makes you any more or less excited, definitely give us some recommendations out there for any future reviews or spoiler reviews you'd like us to do.
Yeah, and don't forget to catch us on YouTube. We're always going to have some short segments for you as well. Some film news, some top 5 lists, all that good stuff. Like and comment, it always helps us out. And that about wraps up our review for Ad Astra. All in all, an amazing film. Do yourself a favor and watch this movie.
All right, guys, we'll see you on the next one. Thank you for tuning in to Dingo Reviews. This is Chad as always, and
Jeremy, thank you again. We'll see you.